Good afternoon and good evening everyone. This is Satya Sai Shivramakrishna, a very lengthy name, means tough child, I know. An ex-Amazonian with a painful ex-story and an instructor from the last 2 years. Today I want to present you a small, sweet, nanni munni pyari C++ course. So first let me explain the content and then we'll go over the details of the course. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started! Little hyper excited? Alright, let us start. Now, tell me this. When you're born, will you directly start running or will you first take baby steps? Baby steps, right? In the same way, when you're first trying to learn a language, we'll first take baby steps. We'll write our very first Hello World program. Followed by you learn what is data, how to store data, what all types of data we can store, how to read data, how to write data, how to manipulate data, how to perform operations on data, how to extract useful information using conditions, how to iterate on the data using loops. We'll learn all these things. Followed by, we'll learn pattern printing. As the name suggests, you'll print a pattern using loops. Now we'll start with arrays. In simple terms, arrays is nothing but when we want to store a set of data points of same kind, then we'll use arrays. In arrays, there are a lot of types. There is one-dimensional arrays, there are two-dimensional arrays, and there are multi-dimensional arrays as well. Once we are done with this, we'll also do pattern printing with arrays. So we can also do 2D pattern printing and 3D pattern printing and a lot of other jugards. Once this is done, we'll jump into my personal favorite, that is nothing but importance of constraints. Let me give you a scenario. How many times this scenario happened to you where you wrote a program and the logic is correct, everything is correct, and when you submit it, out of nowhere, you're getting wrong answer. You'll try to debug it for some time, you're still getting wrong answer. And it feels like God is personally taking revenge on you. You'll debug for 1 hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours, still you won't get it. Now you'll start abuses. Now let us say the abuse order. First you will abuse the question. Then you will abuse the test cases. Third, we'll abuse the flat form. Once the entire problem is debugged by you, now you will start abusing yourself. Hannah, this is entire software engineer cycle of anyone. How to reduce the cycle, to reduce the number of abuses, all you have to do is understand what are data types ranges. I won't say this will solve all your problems, but this will solve a lot of problems. We'll do a very small project, tic-tac-toe. Once the above thing is done, now we'll start with functions. In simple words, functions is nothing but, say you have a couple of lines of code and say you want to reuse it. One way is you can once again write the entire lines of code again and again, or keep this lines of code in a block and use this block wherever you want. This is the whole idea of functions. We'll learn how to pass parameters to the functions, how to pass your arrays, and this is where you'll learn for your very first time what is the difference between pass by reference and pass by value. Once this is done, you'll start with strings, what are strings, how to read input data for strings, how to write strings, and how to pass information with strings. Followed by a small mini project. Whenever when we sign in for the very first time, you give your email address, you also write your password. When you write a password, it says it is a weak password, it says it is a strong password or a medium password, right? How is it doing it? Hannah? It is simple with couple of conditions. So we'll see how to write our own password checker. Now, we are entering into the first nightmare of any student. What is that? When you'll try to learn a language, right, with a humongous hope, and then you'll all of a sudden see these things. Vectors, maps, sets, hash set, tree maps, tree sets, vector of pairs, hash map of vectors, all kinds of things. The moment you see these things, barbat, ghai puri interest baad mein. Hai na? So to make sure your interest is not going, we will do from the very basics to the very advanced on how to use each and every one of them. Then we'll also learn couple of math inbuilt libraries. Min, max, GCD, power functions, all of them. And the most important of all, sort function. And there is one more small jugaad in that, that is comparator, and how to override the comparator. That's a very interesting, once again, a very interesting concept. We'll learn about that. And the last nightmare of any student, pointers. Pointers. Why God? Why? Whenever we get these pointers questions in our question paper, Inky Pinky Ponky, father has a donkey, donkey die, father cry, Inky Pinky Ponky, correct. You'll mark something. That is how we'll mark, right? Turns out, pointers are actually not that complex. It is one of the most intuitive topics of all time. You will enjoy pointers like anything once you actually enjoy the core concept of pointers. So we'll also do that from the very scratch, and we'll close the entire content with user-defined data types. In simple words, they gave you data types, you don't like them, so screw them, we'll create our own. This is the entire content which we are going to cover in our course. Now that you know what all things I'm going to cover, let me explain you how I'm going to cover. The entire sessions are going to be hybrid. Part of session, when I want to explain things, I'll explain it on a whiteboard, and the other part, when I want to write the codes, I'll explain it on the editor. It will be a hybrid set of sessions. And take a guess of how many sessions we are going to have. 10? Not even close. 15? Closer. The actual sessions are 50. Huh, sir? 50 sessions for just C++? The reason why we are taking these many sessions is, each session is only of 15 minutes. Sir, why not extend it? Because for an engineering student, to watch an educational YouTube video of more than 15 minutes is like asking his entire property. Not possible. Watching a movie, hours and hours Netflix, that is possible. But then 15-minute YouTube video, oh my God, definitely not possible. Hannah? So that's why, to make sure your interest doesn't go down, we are keeping the videos short and sweet, not more than 15 minutes. Now that you know how we are going to cover the content, and all the above thing is fine, but why should you watch our videos? Go to YouTube, click on Introductory to C++, you'll get tons of videos. Go to Google, click on Introductory to C++, you'll get tons of resources. Then why us? Because we follow a very simple rule, guys. We teach the way we want to be taught, and the way we want to be taught has to be one of the most simplified ways of all time. That means this entire course will be one of the most simplified course. That is a promise from our side. How can you get the best of this entire course? It's very simple. All you have to do is attend the daily sessions, guys. Daily we'll post our recorded video at 5 p.m. sharp. Watch the video for 15 minutes and then solve the 2 assignments problem with that for 20 more minutes. Daily spend 30 minutes, 30 to 40, you're done. By the end of this course, you'll be very good with the C++. You'll start at the very basics and you'll go till a very good point. Now, if you like the entire above content, please do like, share and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you all in all the sessions. Hello everyone, this is Satya Sai. I hope all of you are doing very well. I know it's been a while, but let us restart our C++ language. Before that, I have 2 small disclaimers. First one, cigarette smoking, alcohol consumption, and having multiple relationships in engineering is injurious to your health. Second one, the content you're going to watch is purely fictional. Any resemblance to any outside world content is sheer coincidence. All right, so let us start. Now, tell me this. When you click on a program and execute it, the application will run, correct? Who will run the application? Your operating system will run your application, correct? In the same way, the programs which you write, it is also a mini application. And who will run these mini applications? You got it? It is operating systems. Clear? Now, in your program, right, we write hundreds of lines of code. But how will the operating system know where to start? It won't know. So that's why we write code inside the main. And this main acts as an entry point to the program. So that's why in most of the codes in your C, C++ or Java, you must have seen codes with main. And the reason for that is it acts as an entry point of the program. Now say you're running an application, some application, and for some reason it got abruptly ended. In that case, you must have seen some number exit code and the abnormal termination. The reason for that is when you run an application, if it is successfully executed, it will return something back to the OS indicating that it is successfully executed. Similarly, when if it is abruptly terminated, it will return something back so that the OS can understand, oh, look, this got terminated. In the same way, the programs which you are writing should also kind of do the same thing. So that is the reason at the end you write return. Now you're writing this at the end. If at all till this particular point, you're not having any issues, that means, can I say it is successfully executed? Yes. So because of that, I'll write 0. Here 0 indicates successful completion, successful execution. Now, can I say the 0 is actually an integer? Of course, you can argue that it's a whole number, but for time being, the 0 comes under integer. So can I say we are returning an integer? Because of that, in front of main, you'll write int main. It is indicating that, look, you are returning int. Is that making sense? Now, we are done with our very first code. Let us run and check what will happen. We got an output here. Let us see. Oh, here we are getting an error. That's right, guys. The reason why you're getting is any line, it should end with a semicolon. The semicolon tells ki this particular line is done. That is one single line. So ending lines with semicolon is one of the most important things. Now let us run the same code once again. That's it. You're not getting any output because you are not printing anything. But since you're not getting any error, we are actually done with our very first program. So yay. And say you want to print something. The syntax for that is you will write cout, 2 left arrows, and inside the full columns, you'll write what you want to print. First, suppose, what is the first thing you want to print? Hello world. So you will simply write hello world. And after this line, what is it we have to write? Semicolon. So let us keep the semicolon and run this. The output should be hello world. But here comes the catch. The cout which we are using, did we implement it or did we define it on our own? Not really. It was already there and we are using it, correct? The things which were already there, and if we use them, that is called as predefined thing. They're already defined. And when you want to use a predefined thing, we should include its library. How will that happen? On top of main, you will say hash include and the library name. In this case, the cout comes from something called as iostream, stream. All right, done. Now let us run the same program again. Now it should give you hello world. Still it is not working. Any guesses? Although this inclusion is correct, there is one line which you have to use, that is namespace std and end with semicolon. Now first let us run and check whether at least now it is working or not. Let us see the output here. Congratulations everyone, it worked. Now the immediate question which is there in your mind is, sir, what is this using namespace std? Don't worry, this I'll give the reason in the next couple of days. So with that, now you know how to write your very first program. So shall we see a couple of questions? Let us see a couple of questions. Say first, suppose you're writing cout A, cout B, and cout C. If first suppose I run this program, what will be the output? Will it be ABC vertically or will it be ABC horizontally? Pause the video and check. All right, let us see what is the output. Array, it is coming ABC horizontally. But as per lines, you wrote them vertically, right? I mean, the computer can at least have that common sense, it should come vertically. Ideally, right? Turns out the computer doesn't even have that much sense. So what you have to do is, you explicitly have to mention to the system key, look, this after this line, go to the next line and print. To do that, you will say /n. Now, if you run your program, can you think what will be the output? Pass and think. All right. Right. Now here you can see the line A is coming in one line. Now you're clicking /n. That means go to the next line and print B and C together. Now say for suppose after B you want C. They have to be a line between them. So here you can say, well, after B, line C. Now if you'll execute your line, if you execute your program, now you'll get A, B, C. This is a very simple program. If you understood this in the same way, okay, let me give you a small question. If say for suppose we run this program, how will the output look like? Pause for a second, think, try it out. All right, let us see. As you can see, after A, it is saying /n. So go to next line. After B, it is again saying /n. So go to next line. After C, is there any /n? Not really. So it will print in the same line. Now, D, it will come in the same line and /n is coming. So once again, it will go to the next line and it will print E. So understand this. The moment you are having a /n, it will immediately go to the next line. So if you're running this program, you are getting A, B, C, D, and E. C and D in the same line. Now I have a small question for everyone. Say for suppose, you have to run the program, but the output should be, you should get output in this order. A, next line B, next line D, next line should be E. Somehow you should skip the line C out C. But don't tell me, sir, I'll remove that particular line. No, you can't do that. But still you should get the output as A, B, D, E. Any guesses? Couple of you might know it. For remaining students, don't worry guys. The idea is very simple. There is something called as comments. If you can just do this, what it says ki it will exempt this line entirely from execution. This idea is comments. So if you want to skip a single line, you can simply keep two forward slashes in front of a line, and that entire line will be exempted from execution. Say for suppose now if you execute this line, execute this program, what will be the output? It will be A, D, E. Why? Because you are skipping line C out B and C out C, and you're only executing A, D, and E. All right. If you want to skip a single line from execution, you will simply keep two forward slashes in front of the line. Say first suppose, let us say we are having few more lines of code here, right? G, this is say we are having few more lines of code. Say for suppose you want to exempt these 4 lines of code from execution. One way is you can keep forward slashes for all these 4 lines individually. But you can see that this is not very an ideal process, right? Like adding forward slash for each line, that's not really, good idea. So what you can do is, instead of keeping it in this way, you can also exempt all of them at a single stretch in this manner. So all the lines between this forward slash and the backward slash will be excluded from execution. If say we run this program now, the output will be A, B, and F. We are getting a compiled output because we skipped the semicolon here. So let us include that. A, B, and F. That'll be it for today, guys. I'll also provide a small assignment link in the comments. Please check that out, and I'll see you in the next session. Thank you. Hello guys, hello everyone. In today's session, we'll discuss about data types and variables. Let us start. So we have a lot of programming languages. We have lot of programming languages, and we write a lot of programs, right? So what is the whole point of writing programs? You'll have some data and then you'll try to manipulate the data. So at the end of the day, any program which you're writing is kind of manipulating the data. So before manipulating the data, what is the first thing you have to do? You have to store the data, correct? So in programming languages, this task will come under variables. So you will actually use variables to store data. Now let me take a very small example. Say for suppose you want to store, say, rice. If you want to store rice, can you tell me what is the storage unit you'll use? You will use knapsack. Say for suppose you want to store water. If it is water, maybe 2-3 liters of water, what is that you'll use? Water bottles. As simple as that. Say for suppose this time you want to store money. You can use a purse. If it is sweets, you'll use a sweet box. Now what is this saying? This is saying that for different type of items you want to store, you are using different kinds of storage units. In similar way, for different kinds of data, you'll have to use different types of variables. Now tell me what are different types of data? Few different types of data which we very frequently use. Numbers, positive numbers, negative numbers. Can I simply say integers? What if you want to store points, 0.3, 0.4, 1.3, 1.4, all these kinds of numbers? In other words, can I say they are rational numbers? And what else? Obviously your text, the things you're typing, A, B, all these things, correct? Text we type. And maybe something called as true or false. Now, the thing is very simple, guys. If at all it is integers, the type of variable we have to use is called as int. If it is rational numbers, that is, you'll have point and decimal point numbers, we'll use something called as float. The text which you're typing, A, B, special characters, all these things, we'll use something called as character. And a simple true or false, that is Boolean. So to store this different types of data, we have different types of variables. Now the question is that how can we use this type of variables? First thing you need to understand is before we use any type of variables, first you have to declare a variable. Now the immediate question is, well, how can you declare a variable? That is very simple. The rules to declare any variable is as follows. First, you need to have any data type and followed by a variable name, semicolon. That's it. Either this or you can have a data type, a variable name initialized to some default value. That's it. You can use one of the two ways to initialize to declare your variables. Now the question is, what in the world are these data types? Don't worry, you already learned them. These are nothing but your data types. That means if you want to store integer, you have to use int data type. If you want to store rational numbers, decimal numbers, you have to store float. If you want to store text, you have to use character. This is the idea. As very simple example is something like this. Say you want to store integer, you can simply write int x equals to, say, maybe 30. If it is, say, float, maybe you can simply say float y is equals to 45.6, something like that. This is one way you can declare your variables and use them. Now, let me give you one more small scenario. You want to store rice, fine, you're using knapsack. If at all, say, you want to use, maybe store 20-30 kgs of rice. In that case, can I say you'll slightly use a bigger knapsack? Similarly, if say you want to store 20-30 liters of water, in that case, can I say you'll actually use water tins? If you have a lot of money to store, lot of money to protect, then in case you'll use banks. That means even in the same scenario, if you want to store a bigger number, here bigger number in the sense with more digits, you can use something called as long int, or you can also use long. In the same way, if you want to use a bigger decimal number, you want to store a bigger decimal number, in that case, you'll use something called as double. If you want to store even bigger, then you can use something called as long double. This is interesting. When it comes to text, if you want to store a single thing, a single alphabet or a single number or anything which is single, then you can use a character.
but obviously we always want to store a bunch of things, right? Single is not at all useful for this. So that is where string comes into the picture. Now you can ask a question. Okay, sir, we'll use long to store big, but big is fine, but how big? I mean, you have to understand what is the meaning of big, right? So to understand that, let us understand what are sizes of each data types. At max, in int, we can store 4 bytes. In long int, you can store 8 bytes. Then this will say 12 bytes. Double is 8 bytes. Long double is 12 bytes. Char is 1 byte and Boolean is also 1 byte. We'll see strings little later. But here there's a small issue. Both long int and long are wrong. The thing is, surprisingly, long is actually 8 bytes. Now your immediate question is, if int is 4 bytes, long is 8 bytes, then you'll guess long int is 6 bytes. That is also wrong. Here, the long int size will actually depend on your system architectures. In few systems, it is 4 bytes. In few systems, it is 8 bytes. In which kinds of system it is what? That is slightly out of our content. We'll discuss it later. So in simple terms, say if you want to store a bigger number, in that case, can I say long is actually preferable one? You can simply use long. Done. So now we understood what is the size of each data type. Okay, all good, excellent. But what is the meaning of 4 bytes? I mean, if someone is saying it is 4 bytes, how much can you store? So this will be discussed in the next session. What is the significance of 4 bytes, 8 bytes, and 12 bytes? How much you can store? This significance, we'll do it in the next session. Before we close for today, there are few more rules which I want to highlight. Rules for declaration. Rule number 1. It is very simple, guys. Before using any item, can I say I have to buy the item? Obviously, right? You can't directly stole the entire TV. You have to buy the TV and then you have to bring it to your home. In a similar way, before using any variable, first you have to declare the variable. So first, declare variable and then use it. Second point is about your variable names. Can you have anything in your variable names? Can you keep man marzi? No, that much is not there. There are two very important rules when it comes to variable names. First, it can only contain either capital letters or small letters or numbers, or there is one more special character, that is underscore. It can only contain these things. It cannot contain anything other than that. And there is one more small rule. Your variable name cannot start with a number. That's it. There you go. These are the few important rules for your variable declaration, guys. So first thing, before you use anything, declare it. Done. Second thing, variable names, it can only contain either capital or small or number or underscore. Second thing, your variable name cannot start with a number. These are the few rules to declare a variable. And these are about data types and their sizes. We will see what is the significance of these sizes in the next session. Now, let us see a very small code to understand the rules clearly. Now, here you can see we declared a lot of variables here. We declared 4 variables. Now, let us run this code. As you can see here, you are getting compiled output. First thing, at line number 6, you are getting an output here. Why? Because in your variable name, you used @ You cannot use @ Why? The things which you can use is either capital, small, number, or underscore. Underscore. Here we are using @ so not valid. Second, line number 5 is also giving you an error. Why? Here you are starting your variable name with a number. That you cannot do. You can only start with either capital, small, or underscore. So let us remove these two improper variable names and let us run the code. You're not getting any error. That means this particular code is correct. Now, small question. Is this variable name correct? Yes or no? Take a minute and tell me. You're not getting any compile time output. That means this is working correctly. So in this case, this is also correct. Why? It contained only small characters or capital letter or numbers or underscore. That's it for today, guys. In tomorrow's session, we'll discuss about the 4 bytes, 8 bytes, and the ranges of data types. Take care. Bye. Hey, everyone. In today's session, we'll see ranges of data types. Let us say we have a number 11. And for this 11, you have to tell me it's 4-bit binary number. Take a second, try it out, and then tell me. It is 1, 0, 1, 1. your immediate question is, how can you say it is correct? So let us check it out. So this is the 0th bit, first bit, second bit, and third bit. In binary representation, for the 0th bit, what is the base value? It is 2 power 0. For the first bit, it is 2 power 1. Second bit, it is 2 square. For the third bit, it is 2 cube. Now let us cross verify. That is, here there is 1. So 1 into its base value, that is 2 cube, plus 0 into base value, that is 2 square, plus 1 into 2 power 1, plus finally once again 1 into 2 power 0. Now we have all this. If you'll add them, 8 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1, you are getting this as 11. All right. Similarly, say you have 25. And for this, say you have to give me 8-bit binary number. You have to give me 8-bit binary number. Take a second, try it out, and then tell me. If it is 8-bit, what are the bit positions? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For 25, the answer is 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, and 1. Once again, how can we say that is correct? Let us cross verify. Base value of 0th bit is 2 power 0. Base value of first bit is 2 power 1. Second bit is 2 square. Third bit is 2 cube, 2 power 4, 2 power 5, 2 power 6, and so on. Now when you'll verify it, 0 into 2 power 7, 0 into 2 power 6, 0 into 2 power 5, 1 into 2 power 4, plus 1 into 2 cube, plus 1 into 2 power 0. If you'll add this entire thing, you will get this as 25. Till now, all is simple. Now tell me one small thing. In this binary representation, which bit number will act as MSB bit? First of all, MSB bit in the sense, most significant bit. This is most significant bit. Now in this binary representation, which bit will act as a MSB bit? You guessed it, the third bit. In this case, third bit acts as MSB bit. Now, similarly, in this scenario, can you tell me which bit will act as an MSB bit? Take a second. Tell me. It will become. Couple of you might think, maybe it is 4. No. Even this scenario, this will become 7th bit. The 7th bit acts as MSB bit. That means, in other words, if it is 4th, if you are taking 4 bits, you are saying the third bit. If it is 8 bits, you are saying the 7th bit. Based on this scenario, if at all say you are taking a 10-bit number, which bit will act as MSB bit? 9th bit. Excellent. If you want to generalize this, if it is an n-bit number, now can you tell me which bit will act as an MSB bit? Tell me. N minus 1th bit. Beauty. Till now, clear. All right. Now, in this case, can you tell me what is the base value of the MSB bit? Here it is third bit. So the base value is 2 power 3. In this case, MSB bit is 7th bit. So the base value is 2 power 7. So in general, if it is n minus 1th bit, what will be the base value? It is 2 power n minus 1. Base value of MSB bit. Now here comes a small learning curve. You might have heard about things called as unsigned and signed. Yes, in your college, we were told there are 2 kinds of things. That is, for one is unsigned and the other thing is signed. To be honest, I never really understood what is the difference. It took me a while. What it says is, if it is a n-bit number, we understood what will be the base value of MSB bit? It is 2 power n minus 1. This is correct. But if at all it is unsigned, only then it is 2 power n minus 1. If at all it is signed, the MSB bit value will become, you guessed it, it is minus 2 power n minus 1. Now you can ask, why in the world is this important? Let us see. Let us take a couple of examples to understand these things better. Let us say n equals to 4. Number of bits you are considering are equals to 4. Now let us take unsigned scenario and signed scenario. If there are 4 bits, Can you tell me the base values? 2 power 0, 2 power 1, 2 power 2. This is the MSB bit. Since it is unsigned, can I say this will also become 2 power 3? Now, you have 4 bits. What is the minimum value you can achieve with these 4 bits? Take a second and tell me what is the minimum value you can achieve with these 4 bits? Can I say the minimum value you will achieve when you will place all zeros here? If all are zeros, 0 into 2 power 0, 0 into 2 power 1, 0 into 2 square, 0 into 2 cube. That means, can I say the minimum value is 0? Similarly, tell me when can you achieve maximum value? What is the maximum value you can achieve? Right. Can I say if you'll place all ones here, then this entire thing becomes 2 power 0 plus 2 power 1 plus 2 square plus 2 cube. What is this entire thing? This entire thing is nothing but 15, right? That means the minimum number I can achieve is 0, maximum number I can achieve is 15, and I can achieve all the elements between 0 to 15. Similarly, now if let us take a signed scenario, there are 4 bits. In this case, what will be the base values? Again, this is 2 power 0, 2 power 1, 2 square, but this is MSB bit, right? If it is MSB bit, this will become minus 2 power 3. Excellent. Now, can you tell me the minimum value? What will be the minimum value? To get, couple of you might say, I'll keep all ones. And if you'll keep all ones, you might say it is minus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1. You might say it is minus 1. This is wrong. To get minimum, okay, at this, I have to keep 1. But at all other things, since we are talking about minimum, can I say, well, we have to keep zeros here? Only in that case, you can get the minimum value possible. So, if that is the scenario, what is the minimum value possible? It is minus 2 power 3. Take a second and tell me what is the maximum value possible in that case? If it is maximum, since you want maximum, all positives you will keep 1. And at negative, to get a maximum positive number, you will try to make it as 0. So here you will make this as 0. If that is a scenario, you will get 2 power 0 plus 2 power 1 plus 2 square. And this entire thing becomes 7. That means if at all n equals to 4, if it is unsigned, if there are 4 bits and if it is unsigned, the minimum number you can store is 0. The maximum number you can store is 15. If it is signed, the minimum number you can store is minus 8. The maximum number you can store is 7. If you understood this concept, try to extend this for n equals to 8. Everyone should do it on your own. Of course, you will do it on your own. My bad. Once again, try it out, guys. Say you have 8 bits. It is slightly interesting now. Once again, if it is unsigned, tell me the minimum. To give you a hint, let me write base values. 2 power 0, 2 power 1, 2 square, 2 cube, 2 power 4, 5, 6. What will be the base value of this? I can directly say it is 2 power 7. Why? Because it is unsigned. Now, once again, to get minimum, you will keep zeros here, all of them, because all are positive numbers. So if that is the scenario, even once again, the minimum value you can achieve is 0. Now take a second and tell me what is the maximum value. Try, keep the pen on the paper, yaar. Try. It is, since you want maximum, you will keep all ones. Now if you keep all ones, what is the sum you are getting? 2 power 0 plus 2 power 1 plus 2 square, so on up to 2 power 7. This is the very big calculation. How can we get this? For time being, let us worry about this calculation. Let us keep all these things aside. Let us say we have 2 power 0 plus 2 power 1 plus 2 square plus 2 cube, so on up to 2 power 7. Isn't this, are you seeing some pattern here? What is that? It's a GP. Excellent. What you are just saying, this is a geometric progression. Correct. Now, do we know sum of terms in geometric progression? Yes, we do. In this scenario, what is A? A is the first term. It is 1. R, common ratio, it is 2. T, how many terms are there? Total, don't tell me there are 7. I'll kill you. 2 power 0, 1, 2, 3, so on to 7. So there are 8 terms. That means, what is sum of T terms in GP? Isn't that simply nothing but a into r power t minus 1 by r minus 1? Don't worry, you might have seen this formula as a into r power n minus 1 by r minus 1. I know, we are just in place of n, I took t. So if you'll substitute this, what is that you'll get? 1 into 2 power 8 minus 1 by 2 minus 1. That means this entire thing becomes 2 power 8 minus 1. So if that is a scenario, this you are getting this as 2 power 8 minus 1. So for a small generalization, if at all we do this for n terms, that is 2 power 0 plus 2 power 1 plus 2 square, so on up to 2 power n minus 1. In this case, once again, can I say a value is 1, r value is 2, but the total number of terms are n. So now if we'll apply the formula, this entire thing becomes a into, let us write the formula once again. This becomes 1 into 2 power, how many terms are there? N. N minus 1 by 2 minus 1. That is 2 power n minus 1. A useful formula to remember. Okay, all this is fantastic. Now, similarly, we got for if it is 8-bit number, for unsigned, we got the range. Okay. Similarly, for signed, can you think of the range? If it is an 8-bit number, what is the base value of the MSB bit? It is minus 2 power 7. And all others are positive. 2 power 6, 2 power 5, so on up to 2 power 0. Now, obviously, to get a negative, you'll make this as 1 and all others you'll keep this as 0. If you'll do that, minimum value is minus 2 power 7. Similarly, can you think of the maximum value? Same, right? If it is maximum, you'll make this as 0 and all others you'll make this as 1 because you need to get maximum. If that is a scenario, this is the sum will become 2 power 6, 2 power 5, 2 power 4, so on up to 2 power 0. What will be this value? We just discussed. This entire thing will become 2 power 7 minus 1. So if it's a 4-bit unsigned, this is the range. If it is 4-bit signed, this is the range. If it is 8-bit unsigned, the range is 0 to 2 power 8 minus 1. And if it is 8-bit signed, the range is minus 2 power 7 comma 2 power 7 minus 1. Are you seeing a small pattern here? Is there a pattern? Isn't this same as 0 comma 2 power 4 minus 1? And isn't this same as minus 2 power 3 comma 2 power 3 minus 1? If you understood these things, for these things, given an n-bit number, and if it is unsigned, can you tell me the minimum value? 0, 0. An n-bit unsigned, it is 0. Correct. Can you tell me the maximum number? What will that be? Think, if it is 4, you are having 2 power 4 minus 1. If it is 8, you are having 2 power 8 minus 1. If it is n, can I say, well, you will have 2 power n minus 1? That's it. Now, this is when it comes to unsigned. Now the question rises, well, what if it is signed? Let us see. If it is signed, what is the minimum? Let us take a look here once again. If it is 4-bit, for signed, it is minus 2 power 3. If it is 8, minimum is minus 2 power 7. If it is n, it is minus 2 power n minus 1. Similarly, what will be the maximum? For 4, it is 2 power 3 minus 1. For 8, it is 2 power 7 minus 1. Then for n, can I say it is 2 power n minus 1 minus 1? That's it. This is the most important thing which you'll see, guys. This is a very, very, very useful information. Now we can ask, why is that important? And what is there here? Let us see. Now comes the final jugaad. In 1 byte, how many bits are there? There are 8 bits. Correct? Now, your integer, what is the size of your integer? We discussed it yesterday only. It is 4 bytes. Your integer is 4 bytes. That means it is, can I say it is 8 into 4? Can I say it is 32-bit number? That means your integer, for your integer, your n value is 32, right? If that is the scenario, now if your integer is unsigned and you know that n is 32, what will be the range, guys? 0 comma, let us use the same formula, that is 2 power 32 minus 1, katam. If it is signed, once again say same n equals to 32, what will be the range? Minus 2 power 32 minus 1, that is minus 2 power 31, comma 2 power 31 minus 1. That's it. Done. We got the int range. Katam. Similarly, let us take long. What is long? It is 8 bytes. What is 8 bytes? Sorry, 8 bytes. 8 into 8. That is 64-bit number, right? That means, can I say n is 64? Once again, in this scenario, if it is unsigned and it is given that n is 64, the minimum value which you can store is 0. The maximum value is 2 power 64 minus 1. Same if it is signed and if n value is 64, in that case, this becomes 64. That is 2 power minus 2 power 63, comma 2 power 63 minus 1. There you go. This is how you can get your int range and long int range just by using this logic. I have a small question. What is 2 power 32? Can you understand 2 power 32? That much scene is not there. If I'll say you to compare 10 power 5 with 2 power 32, which is bigger? Oh, no, sir. The thing is, we generally understand a number in 10 powers, but we never understand a number which is in 2 powers. Henna? So this is why we have to do a small approximation here. Now time for little math. What is 2 power 10? 2 power 10 is 1, 0, 2, 4. And can I say this value is almost same as 10 cube? Approximately. If this is the scenario, take whole cube on both sides. That means, can I say 2 power 30 is nothing but approximately, can I say it is 10 power 9? Based on this, multiply with 2 on both sides. Multiply with 2 square on both sides. That means, can I say this becomes 2 power 32, which is approximately same as 4 into 10 power 9. Now whole square on both sides. Then what you get, 2 power 64 is approximately same as 6 into 10 power 18. These are the two most important things which we'll use. In couple of questions, in lot of questions you must have seen, array value is in the range 1 to 10 power 9 or 2 into 10 power 9. This is the reason why they'll give you numbers in the range of 10 power 9. Okay. If the same thing, if you'll divide by 2 on both the sides, then can I say this is 2 power 31 is approximately 2 into 10 power 9. If you'll divide this by 2 into both the sides, this will become 2 power 63, approximately same as 8 into 10 power 18. That's it. That means, to simply rewrite this range is from 0 comma 4 into 10 power 9 minus 1. Do we need to write minus 1? It is already an approximation. You can just neglect that. And this becomes minus 2 into 10 power 9 comma 2 into 10 power 9. Similarly, this is approximately 16 into 10 power 18. And this entire thing is minus 8 into 10 power 18 comma 8 into 10 power 18. This is how you are getting int range and long int range. Based on this given bit number, can you get the range? Simple Hasmuxi logic. Now you can do it, right? Now you can have a small question. Sir, all this is fine, sir. But how will you declare elements as int, unsigned and signed? You can have a question. How to declare elements as signed and unsigned? It is very simple. If you are simply writing int x equals to say some number 15, if you don't mention anything, you'll directly, it is considered as signed. In that case, if you want to declare something as unsigned, you have to explicitly mention key, look, signed int x equals to, so let us take a different variable, y. Then this will be considered as unsigned. This is how you will declare signed and unsigned. But there is one small note, very, very important. That is, the signed and unsigned, these are only present for integer data types. Only present for integer data types. That means, are they present for float, double, long double, all these things? No, they are not. Then you can immediately ask a question. Acha sir, if that is not possible, then what is that we'll use in float and double all these things? For float, double, all these things, by default, all of them are signed only. All of them are signed only. That means you can store negative values as well. Shall we close our session with one last choti small. I know that you already patiently watched 20 minutes of YouTube video. It is already above the top. One last question. What is size of float? 4 bytes. What is size of int? 4 bytes. If float is 4 bytes, that means what will be the range? Same as int, right? If both float and int have same ranges, then why are we using floats? Are they having same ranges? This we will see in the next session. That's it for today. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye bye. Tata. Bye. Hi everyone. Till now we learned about variables and data types. Now let us learn about operators. Operators will allow us to perform calculations on variables, and it will also help us to apply some conditions on the variables. So let us deep dive into them. Now, the moment you hear the word operators, what are the first things that will strike your mind? Few operators are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. These are the things that will strike your mind. Agreed. But these things, they actually come under arithmetic operators. And what are present in arithmetic operators? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulus. To best understand operators, we'll directly let us take a couple of examples and solve them. All right. Now you are printing a plus b. In this case, what will be the output? Simple. It will be 21. Correct. Now 15 minus 6. What will be the output? 9. Correct. Now 15 into 6. If you are printing it, you will get it as 120. Right. Now a by b. 15 by 6. What will be the output? 15 by 6. Couple of people might say, well, if you can do with 3, that is 5 by 2. Correct? 3 5s are 3 2s are. This you might say 2.5. Right? But this is actually wrong. The thing is, whenever you are having integers, it will perform an integer division. And it will do an integer division and it will only give you a quotient. So what is the quotient here? In this case, if you are doing 15 by 6, the quotient is 2. Correct. So the actual output is 2. And once again, a plus b, it is once again 21. My bad. Now let us see a modulus b. What is this? Previously, we discussed that a by b will give you quotient. Understand that a modulus b will give you remainder when a is divided by b. If that is the scenario, for this, if you are dividing 15 by 6, what will be the remainder? The remainder is 3. So that will be the output. Let us check whether it is correct or not. Let us run our code and check. Right. 21, 9, 120, 2, 21, and 3. Correct. Now, let us do the same thing. All the same thing will apply for float as well. Same rules for addition, subtraction, multiplication. But there's a small catch here. Let us see the division part. In case of division, let us run and check what is the output. This time, you are getting 1.29412. That means if you are doing division with integers, you'll only get quotient. If you are doing division with float, you'll get the exact quotient with the decimal points. So here the output is you will get quotient with the decimal points. All right. Now let us execute this and check. Previously, what was this giving you? In case of integers, if you are applying modulus for 2 integers, you are getting remainder. Let us do the same thing for floating point and check what you're getting. This time you're getting a compile output, that is invalid operands to binary expression float and float. So guys, understand one thing. Between floats, you cannot use a modulus operator. Whenever there is a float, understand that you cannot use modulus operator. All right. This is about your simple arithmetic operators. Done. Now, there are few other kinds of operators as well. Those are called as relational operators. Now, as the name suggests, relational, it is very simple. It will help you to find a relationship between two variables. Now, your question is, what kind of relationship? Simple. Relationship can be greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, maybe less than or equal to, maybe not equal to, or maybe whether it is equal to or not. These are the relational operators which are used to find the relationship between two variables. To understand that, let us once again take few examples. Let us execute the simple statement. See out, you are printing A greater than B. Now tell me, is A greater than B? Yes, it is true. Now, can the system print true? How can it print true? It can't print true, right? So whenever it is true, indirectly your system prints 1. 1 is saying true, 0 is saying false. How can you cross verify that claim? Let us execute this statement and check. You are taking a boolean variables a2, you are initializing that as true, b2 as false, and let us run and check it out. As you can see here, you are getting 1 and 0. That is, 1 is indicating true, 0 is indicating false. Now with this intuition, let us check a couple of conditions. Now, tell me, is A greater than B, true or false? It is true, right? So that means what will be the output? Output should be 1. Is A1 less than B1? 4.4, is it less than 3.4? Obviously false. That means what should be the output? It should be 0. A greater than or equal to B. Is 15 greater than or equal to 6? Of course it is correct. So the output is true. You will get it as 1. A1 not equal to B1. Is 4.4, is this not equal to 3.4? Yes, it is correct. So the output is 1. Now, here you are checking if A is equals to B. While checking if two things are equal, you can't use single equal to. Why? Because you are using a single equal to for assignment. If you are using a single equal to for assignment and to compare two things, if you'll once again raise A equals to B, how can the system differentiate whether you are using this for assignment or comparison? It obviously cannot. That's why you will use double equal to for comparison. All right. So A double equals to B, is it correct? Is 15 equals to 6? Obviously not. So it is giving you false. That means it will indirectly print 0. Let us run and check whether we are getting the same output or not. 1, 0, 1, 1, 0. That's it. So these are your relational operators. Mostly you will see usage of relational operators inside the if and else conditions. Since we haven't discussed that, but I still wanted to show you the working. That's why we are discussing it in this way. Now there are few more operators. Can you think? Arithmetic done, relational done. Other thing is logical. This we must have seen in your electrical subjects, right? That is, you'll have a AND operator or OR operator and NOT. Programmatically, if you want to get AND, you can use two ANDs, OR as two straight lines and NOT as not symbol. So this is how you can programmatically represent. You can either use AND like English way, or you can also use symbolic way. Both are correct. So once again, let us check a couple of examples to understand them better. Now, tell me this, guys. First things first, is A greater than B? Is this correct? Yes, A is greater than B. Okay. Is A1 less than B1? Is A1 less than B1? No. That means here you are checking 1 and 0. Now, you must have remembered truth table. In case of AND, 1, when will you get true? If both are true, you will get true, correct? So let us remember a couple of points here. That is, in case of AND, If both true, we will get true, else false. In this case, are both true? No. That means what should be the output? It should be 0. Right. Now let us see this. Is A greater than B? A is greater than B? Yes, it is greater. Correct. Is A and B are equal? No, they are not. That means, isn't this nothing but 1 or 0? Now let us understand about OR. In case of OR, if both are false, then it is false. If not, true. So let us write that. If both are false, then false, else you'll get it as true. So in this case, are both false? No, right? One of them is actually true. That means, can I say you'll get it as true? That means you will get it as the output should be 1. That is what you'll get. Now, let us check this condition. A1 greater than or equal to B1. Is that correct? Is 15 greater than or equal to 6? Yes, it is correct. So I'll get it as 1. And A not equal to B. 15 not equal to 6. Is that correct? Of course it is. So 1. Now tell me, 1 and 1, both are true. What should be the output? And both are true, you will get it as true. That's why you will get it as 1. Now let us see not. Not is very simple, guys. If it is true, it will print false. It will convert true to false, and it will print false to true. As simple as that. True to false, false to true. So in this case, is A equal to B? False. Since you are applying not, so not of false, that is true. So that means you should get it as 1. So now let us check whether you are getting the same output or not. Yes, 0, 1, 1. You are getting it. These are your relational operators. Now, there is one small operator which we often tend to forget, that is your assignment operator. And what is that? A single equal to, correct? So if suppose you are writing int x equals to 10 and say you are printing cout x, what will happen? Simple, it will directly print 10. That's it, khatam. We feel like assignment operator is actually this much only. The advantage with assignment operator is assignment operator can combine with all the arithmetic operators. That is the advantage. Now let us see how we can do that. That is, you can simply write x plus is equals to 10. Now your immediate question is, what in the world is the meaning for this? It is indirectly same as x is equals to x plus 10. Both are exactly same. Well, how can we cross verify? How will you know if both are same? Simple. Let us print x. Now if both are same, the output should now be 20. Let us run. You are getting it as 20. Similarly, you can do it for other scenarios as well. That is x into equals to, say you are doing 10. Now what is the meaning of this? Same. X is equals to x into 20. This is x equals to x into 10. Let us output and check. You should get 200, right? You're getting 200? Yes. So similarly, you can also have x equals to 10. This is nothing but x is equals to x divided by 10. And similarly, you can also have x modulus equals to, say, 7. Idea is very simple. This is indirectly nothing but x is equals to x modulus 7. So all these are same. Plus, multiplication, subtraction. You can also write x minus equals to maybe say 10. This is indirectly nothing but x is equals to x minus 10. So the advantage with arithmetic, your assignment operator is you can combine this with your arithmetic operators. You can say, well, what in the world is this useful for? It kind of looks same only. These alone are with integers might not give you a big difference, but when we discuss strings, this will have a adverse effects. We'll discuss them when we're discussing strings. But keep in mind that using arithmetic operators and assignment operators, you can combine these two things in this way as well. Now that you are clear with assignment operators, let us come to our nightmare. In your arithmetic operators, there are
two more things you must have read in your college days. One is, if you remember, they are called as increment and decrement, plus plus and minus minus, increment and decrement operators. Now, to just give you a simple idea, if you will print, say, plus plus 5, what should be the output? It should be 11. Let us see. Are you getting 11 or not? Yes, it is. Your arms are getting 11. Okay, brilliant, fantastic. If you will print y plus plus, ideally it should give you 11 only. Let us see what will give you. It's actually giving you 10. The thing is, this is called as pre-increment and this is called as post-increment. And in generally, most of the interview MCQ questions, you'll generally find these kinds of MCQ questions. Questions like, what will be the output if it is C y plus 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 y plus y plus plus. And these are very nasty questions. And these are very confusing as well, right? Or questions like, let us say, right, A greater than B, or, and say we are using plus plus y, and before executing this, say you are doing C out y, and once again after executing this line, say you are printing y. They might ask what will be the output. You might have seen these kinds of questions, and here there's actually a small trick. So this tricks all we'll discuss in the next session. That's it for today. Thank you guys. See you in the next session. Bye.